You know, it's the second most common element in the Earth's crust. It's literally everywhere, in sand, in rocks, almost everything you touch. But this super common material has a secret, a new status that puts it right at the heart of global economics and national security. So think about it for a second. What's the one thing that connects the steel beams holding up our skyscrapers, the tiny microchips inside our phones, and the solar panels that are powering our future? The answer, well, it might not be what you think. Yep, silicon, the same stuff that's right under our feet. And in 2025, the US government made its importance official policy. So what's the big deal here? What actually happened? Well, the US government took a hard look at all the materials that are absolutely vital for the country to run. And guess what? Silicon finally made the list. And trust me, this is way more than just a name change. It's a huge signal about the future. Now, before we get any deeper, let's make sure we're on the same page with this term, critical mineral. It really boils down to two key things. First, the material has to be essential, like can't live without it, essential for the economy or national security. And second, and this is the part that really matters, its supply chain has to be shaky, vulnerable to being cut off. And that's exactly what happened. Using some new criteria, the U.S. Geological Survey put silicon on this very exclusive list. It was an official nod to the fact that silicon is both completely indispensable and, well, its supply is pretty insecure. So why is it so essential? Honestly, look around. It's everywhere. It's a key ingredient for making steel stronger and for creating those lightweight aluminum alloys. It's the absolute backbone of the chemical industry for all sorts of products called silicones. And in its purest form, polysilicon, it's the very foundation of our entire digital world. We're talking every semiconductor, every solar panel. And this is where we get to the core of the problem, at least for the United States. We use a ton of silicon, but when we look in our own cupboards, they're starting to look a little empty. In 2025, for the very first time, the US hit a pretty scary milestone. We became dependent on other countries for more than half of our entire silicone supply. If you want to see what a national vulnerability looks like in a single number, this is it. This chart really shows you the scale of that dependency. Look at this. In 2025, the US brought in 180,000 metric tons of silicon metal, but we only exported 30,000. That's a 6-to-1 ratio. We're buying way, way more than we're selling to the rest of the world. Now, to really get the US situation, you have to zoom out and look at the whole world. And when it comes to silicon, the global picture is basically dominated by one single country. The scale of this is just staggering. In 2025, China produced almost 80% of all the silicon in the world. That's not just leading the market. That is a level of control over a vital resource that we've rarely seen before. And when you produce that much, you get to set the price. This quote from the USGS says it all. When China's prices hit a multi-year low, the entire global market feels it. And that makes it incredibly tough for producers anywhere else to even compete. So as you can probably imagine, an imbalance like this doesn't just go unnoticed. It starts to create all kinds of friction, economic tension, new government policies, and a market that becomes really, really unpredictable. So here's kind of a play-by-play of how that tension unfolded. First, there was a global oversupply of silicone, which made prices drop. So the US started investigating and found that countries like Brazil and Malaysia were unfairly subsidizing their products. Basically, their governments were helping them sell silicone for artificially cheap prices. The US response? They slapped on duties, which are just a type of tax or tariff, to try to level the playing field. But, and here's the twist in the story, even with all these new tariffs, US imports of silicon didn't drop. They went through the roof. They jumped by about 50% from the year before. So what on earth is going on? Well, the most likely answer seems to be good old-fashioned market anxiety. The USGS suggests that companies were so worried about more tariffs or other countries maybe restricting exports that they just decided to buy up as much silicon as they could while they still could. In other words, they were stockpiling. Okay, so let's put all the pieces of this puzzle together. This is clearly about a lot more than just rocks and sand. This is about supply chains, it's about technology, and it's about our fundamental economic security. And don't forget, this information is coming directly from the U.S. Geological Survey. This is the government agency whose entire job is to keep an eye on the resources that are absolutely vital for the country. So when they raise a red flag, you probably want to pay attention. So here's the real takeaway. Putting silicon on that critical minerals list isn't just giving it a new label. It's an official admission from the government that a material absolutely fundamental to modern life in America comes from a supply chain that we, for the most part, do not control. Which leaves us with a really big question for the future. As our technology makes silicon more and more essential, does the entire world's dependence on just one main source turn the very building block of our civilization into its single greatest weakness?